Hi, and welcome to Comedy Recap. Today we're going to explore 1988's Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Beware, spoilers ahead. We begin by watching a woman offer her precious pearls to a man named Lawrence to save his people. He continuously turns down her offer, but she leaves him no choice in the end. He accepts her generous contribution, and after the opening credits sequence, we see Lawrence, who is receiving information from his accomplice, named Inspector Andre, about a potential mark. Without hesitation, he heads over to the casino table to sit next to the mark, and he calls Andre over to sell his ring. When the mark hears that he might be selling his royal ring, she smittingly follows to find out if he's actually royalty. Andre plays up Lawrence's fake persona, and the woman comes over to introduce herself. Her name is Fanny, and she tries to explain that she wants to help him, allowing him to play up his lie even more. He jumps off the balcony, and Fanny asks Andre where to find him. Of course, she ends up going over to his house, where she donates some jewelry to his fake cause. The next day, Lawrence splits the shares of the spoils between Andre and his butler, Arthur, before traveling to Zurich. He is, without a doubt, a true con man. Once on the train, we come across Freddie, who spots a mark sitting by herself. As he approaches her table, she offers for him to sit, and he acts surprised by the prices before ordering some water. The woman asks why he's only getting water, and he starts to tell his story about how he's saving his money to help his ill grandmother. Lawrence spots the con from a mile away, and he observes Freddie as he continues to spin his web of lies. The woman eventually falls for the story, and she calls the waiter back to order him some food on her tab. Freddie orders a full-course meal, and later, he heads to a shared cabin with Lawrence. The difference between the two men is painfully obvious, and Lawrence tries to catch him in his lie. After he apologizes about his sick grandmother, Freddie simply comes out and says that he does these dishonest things to get what he wants. After some simple introductions, Freddie explains his philosophy of using women, and Lauren tells him that he's not used to the art of the con. When Freddie mentions that he's going to the same place as Lawrence feels threatened and tries to talk him into going to another location. When he finds out that Freddie won't be swayed so easily, Lawrence steps out to make a quick phone call. The train pulls into the station, and Freddie is convinced to stay on the train when a beautiful young woman says she's going to where Lawrence mentioned. Lawrence gets off the train and watches the train leave as Andre comes up to see if the decoy worked. Lawrence mentions that he needed her to distract Freddie from the area. The next day, Andre gives him information about his next mark, Mrs. Knudsen. When she pulls up to the cafe, it turns out that Freddie has already talked her out of some money. Lawrence arranges for Andre to bring Miss Knudsen out to watch Freddie spend the money he lied to get, and she decides to press charges against Freddie. Once in jail, Freddie tries to say he knows someone from the area, and he eventually brings up Lawrence's name. Andre calls Lawrence to the situation, and Lawrence explains that the charges are serious. After Lawrence pretends to negotiate Freddie's release, he tells him about the terms of his release, and Freddie agrees to never come back to Europe. After saying goodbyes at the plane, Fanny happens to spot the two of them, and she eventually talks to Freddie while on the flight about his association with Lawrence. He finds out that Lawrence used a con to get money from her, and he keeps the con going. Later, Arthur comes to Lawrence, and he announces that Freddie is there to see him. Lawrence tries to buy Freddie's silence, but Freddie wants something more. He wants Lawrence to tell him how to con on his level. Lawrence agrees to teach him, and he talks to Andre about a plan he's come up with. Lawrence tells him that he's taking him in to get him out. After a makeover and etiquette practice, Lawrence makes a quick gentleman out of Freddie. The next day, Lawrence starts a con which involves Freddie playing his slow royal brother. Lawrence takes the country gal to a hidden room where Freddie is waiting to play his part. Once they get to his room, the country woman starts to question her choice in agreeing to marry Lawrence. Later, another woman is put through a similar act of Freddie playing the slow brother. After conning multiple women with the same story, Lawrence sits down with everyone to split up the profits, but Freddie ends up with nothing. Lawrence explains that the student doesn't get paid anything until he knows that Freddie will spend his money wisely. Freddie plays along for the time being, but after hearing about the terrible things Lawrence wants him to do, Freddie decides to go his own way in a different location. Lawrence believes that life will go back as normal, but he soon hears Freddie trying to work a con in town. Freddie explains that he's decided to stay in town to work, but Lawrence tells him that there isn't enough room for both of them to work cons. Freddy decides that they should make a bet to decide who stays and who goes. They decide to pick a mark, pick an amount, and whoever gets that much out of her wins. Just then, they catch sight of Janet Colgate, and they decide that she's the perfect mark. They decide on $50,000, and the two of them make the bet. That night, Lawrence tries to make his move at the casino, but Freddy soon shows up as a handicapped war veteran. He wheels himself up to the table between Janet and Lawrence, and after losing a bet, he hastily retreats. Janet follows him, and she tries to tell him that she might be able to help him. He tells her that he was there to win money for his grandmother to have an operation, and after having a talk over drinks, she gives him a small amount of winnings. After this, she asks if an operation will help him, but he spins another lie to explain about a previous heartbreak that caused him mental distress to where he can't walk. He tells her about a psychiatrist that specializes in the treatment he needs, but with a fee of $50,000, he's not able to get help. Soon, Janet takes him to her room, where she says she'll contact the doctor he spoke of. She writes a letter to the fake doctor, and she tells him that when the time comes, she'll pay for it all. After she leaves to send the letter, Freddy starts to celebrate a little too early. When Janet goes downstairs, she hears a man call out the fake doctor's name, and she follows him to find Lawrence playing the fake doctor. After Janet explains Freddy's condition, she tries to talk him into seeing him upstairs, and Lawrence convinces her to pay him directly if he agrees to treat Freddy. When Janet appears upstairs with Lawrence, Freddy can't believe that he worked himself into his con. During a fake examination of Freddy's legs, he almost breaks when Lawrence takes a fake plant stalk and whips his legs to see if he reacts. Lawrence agrees to take the case, and he moves Janet and Freddy into the villa he says he's renting. Lawrence drives them to his actual home, and he gets Arthur to play along. Lawrence takes Janet on a tour of the premises, and he explains to Janet that essentially tough love will be what heals Freddy. The next day, Lawrence tells Janet that he has a wonderful plan for Freddy's treatment, but Arthur brings a note that Freddy left in his room. When Janet reads the note, she finds out that Freddy plans to drown himself. Lawrence tries to get her to ignore him, but after he's called away by Arthur, Freddy really plays up the sympathy card. Janet tries to talk him out of drowning himself, and she ends up spending some time with him on the little beach. Eventually, Lawrence comes down and convinces Janet to enjoy herself with him, and they go out dancing in a local club while they make Freddy watch them from the sidelines. By Freddy, some sailors think that Lawrence is taunting a fellow soldier, and Freddy uses this. He tells them that Janet used to be his girl, but ever since he was put in a chair, Lawrence stole her away from him. The sailors don't look too kindly on this, and they ask Freddy if he wants them to kidnap Lawrence. Later that night, Lawrence goes to drop off Janet, and he finds out that Janet isn't actually rich. She sold a lot of things back home to try and raise the money for Freddy's treatment. Lawrence explains that he never knew sincere people like her existed, and he tells her goodnight before going to drive Freddy home. Lawrence tries to tell Freddy that the bet is off, but Freddy comes up with a new version of the bet. He decides to bet that the first one to get her in bed will win the bet, fair and square. When they get back to Lawrence's villa, they find that the sailors are blocking the entry, and they convince Lawrence to talk to the captain in the back. When he goes back there, the sailors end up kidnapping him, and Freddy drives the car into the villa. Later that night, he goes to visit Janet at her hotel room. While there, he confesses his love, and he tells her that he thinks he can walk again if she would love him back. Sure enough, she tells him that she really does love him in return, and she has him get up to walk to her. After taking a few steps to her, she tries to coax him into the bedroom where she says she'll convince him that she loves him. Once he makes it in there, he goes to take her, but Lawrence shows that he has been in the bedroom the whole time. When they get out of the hotel room, Lawrence explains that he is part of the Royal Navy, and that is how he got away from the sailors. Lawrence even takes Freddy to another hotel room where the soldiers are going to keep an eye on him until he can get Janet to the airport. Once at the airport, he convinces Janet that Freddy will find her if he really loves her, and she leaves. Afterwards, Lawrence goes to pick up Freddy, and he finds that they have become best friends. Outside, Lawrence tells Freddy that Janet is gone, and he has officially lost the bet. After he drives off, Freddy decides to head back up to Janet's room, where he calls for her. After he thinks that she's really gone, Janet runs into the hotel room looking for him. She confesses that she really is in love with him, and he can't believe it. Back at Lawrence's villa, he gets a phone call from Andre, who tells him that Janet went back to her room with Freddy. Assuming that Freddy ended up winning the bet, Lawrence waits for Freddy. When Janet shows up, she tells a sob story about Freddy taking her money. Lawrence decides to pay her back the $50,000, and he promises to take her directly to the airport. Before she boards the plane, she gives him back the money, and Andre brings Freddy back in a bathrobe. Freddy explains that she took everything he had, and Lawrence realizes that she actually took the money from him and left Freddy's clothes in the bag. Inside is a note where Janet says her goodbyes, and it becomes clear that she conned them both. Back at the villa, Freddy says his goodbyes, and he asks if Lawrence realized that she was conning them. Soon they start to hear the murmur of tourists, and they see that Janet is guiding them there. She pulls the two men into the con that she's pulling, and they play along perfectly. And that's all for Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. This film was recently remade with a gender swap, but nothing can come close to the original. Steve Martin is another staple of the 80s, and his comedic style never goes out of fashion. We hope you enjoyed this recap. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.